Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Erin Schulte. I'm the coordinator of counseling and character education here in Parkway. And we really appreciate, we're going to be doing mental health nights throughout the year. We'll probably have 2 more during the school year and potentially 1 over the summer. Our goal with these really is to normalize the conversation about mental health, that it's something that certainly now, and I dare I say post-COVID, but we've all kind of endured this really different, rough couple of years, and it's something that's prevalent in our society. It's something that potentially we were all struggling with at one point during those couple years, and maybe still the fallout. And I think certainly for our students, that's something that here in Parkway we are paying attention to, something that we want to show them that we care about, and that we also are a resource for them should they be struggling, that we're people they can talk to here in this school district. Tonight, I'm excited we're going to have Brian Kuhn from Care and Counseling, someone that I've been working closely with the past couple of years to implement what we are calling our student wellness program, which is a little bit more proactive take on mental wellness. He's going to tell you more about it, so I'm not going to steal that thunder. But he's also going to talk a bit about just general things that we can look for, general things, especially, again, right now in the current situation we find ourselves in, what trends are there, and for you as parents, different ways to respond in a good way for your students. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but just really excited to have you here again, Brian, and excited that you'll be with us throughout the school year for the Student Wellness Program. So Brian Kuhn.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you all for being here. We are we're so excited to be partners with Parkway in all this exciting things that we're doing together, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go along, but just always exciting to get in front of parents and other adults and young people who care about the mental health of young people, and talk a little bit about what's going on, how we engage our young people in a way that allows them to feel more open and confident in speaking about and sharing their mental health journeys and what's going on with them. But then also we'll touch a little bit on the Student Wellness Program as a whole, and what we're doing with that, and why we think it's so important in the work that we're doing in partnership with Parkway. I like to just quickly introduce myself as a Parkway parent. Also, we have 2 students in Parkway, a sophomore and a 6th grader, and my wife is a proud Parkway alum from Parkway West, and so we are just really thrilled to not only be able to partner professionally, but then to be wonderful Parkway parents and working to just better this community that is so important to us. I pushed the wrong button, but I got it right the second time. So, all right. So the challenge, as some of you know, the challenge of doing something like this in a 90-minute workshop seminar setting is that we're gonna breeze over the very top of everything, right? Like, it's just getting into the nitty-gritty. We just won't have the time, and we don't have the time. Really, the time. I'd talk all day on this stuff, but people want to go home, and my wife's going to tell me to be quiet at some point. And we're just, but know that one of my goals for tonight is to get you all thinking, get you excited about action steps that we can be taking now to increase the mental wellness of our young people, and maybe even ourselves, and that understanding of just being maybe a little more confident in your own skills of how we reach out to each other, right? So if nothing else from tonight, I hope we walk away going, oh, I want to know more. I want to know more about that. I want to learn a little bit more about that. I want to fine-tune that skill. I want to get a better sense of how that works, whatever it might be, right? Because it's in those questions and in those desires that we really start to make some progress, and we really start to come together and support one another in this. So 3 things. My 3 goals are talk about what's happening, right? Give us a real quick 10,000-foot view of where we are, especially with our adolescents. and where we were pre-COVID, where we are kind of in whatever we call this time, and just to give you all just a better sense of what our young people have been going through, what the statistics are saying, all of that. When we do conversations like this, we know we're probably, a lot of times we're, preaching to the choir, so to speak, right? If you weren't interested in this, you probably wouldn't be here tonight. But maybe there's someone out there or in this room who this is just a way to maybe really get them thinking in a different way. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about where we are. We'll talk a little bit about what we do if these moments, these mental health moments, right, these mental health challenges or struggles show up in our young people, how we get to better understand them as the adults in their lives, how we get to better communicate with them in a way that they feel confident in sharing with us what's going on, and that understanding that that asking for help and asking for support is a good thing, and how we make sure we're reflecting that back to them. But then also just that sense of us remembering what our kind of main charges are in those moments as the adults in their lives, right? How do we not feel like we have to solve the problem in the moment, but how do we come alongside them and have them feel like we are with them as we go forward and try to figure out what's going on. And then the last thing is how do we make a shift, right? Clearly, the mental health system that we have now in place, if you want to call it a system at all, doesn't serve our needs as a society, doesn't serve our needs as people in the lives of young people, doesn't serve our needs as just any of us as people in general. And so how do we as a small community of folks who share this common school district together, how do we even make a small little shift, right, with the hope of then one little small shift leads to another, and then all of a sudden we're able to come at something a little bit different and a little new. So we'll get to that too. Okay. Oh, that's really small. But that's okay because they're not great. I mean, they're good things to know, but they're not going to make you feel great. So here's just the Surgeon General released a report on youth mental health I think it was last year, and so. These are some of the statistics that they released in that report. You can get these statistics all over the place. I just chose to pull them out of here, right? So this is where we were pre-COVID, right? So there's a lot of boxes up there. So without even getting into reading each one of them, let's just say there was a lot going on already. Right? So we entered into a pandemic already in crisis. You can look at statistics around suicide. You can look at statistics around anxiety. You can look at statistics around depression and self-harming. Right? All these indicators were trending upward, right? In terms of a larger percentage of our young people were experiencing these pre-COVID. So this is not new. Right? I think one of the challenges that sometimes we face as adults or people who live through a time as traumatic as COVID is that we forget what it was like before, right? And it becomes our fixation point. And so we start saying, well, if it wasn't for COVID, this wouldn't be happening. If the schools didn't close, this wouldn't be happening. Okay, right. Did that have an effect? Sure, and we'll talk about that. But let's also acknowledge the fact that these things were happening well before COVID entered into all of our lives. A couple of the ones I'll just point out to you all is I think that we really need to pay attention to that one in the middle, that 10-year 2009 to 2019 gap, that high school students were reporting feeling persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness by an increase of 40%, right, over that period of time. That is no small increase, right? That is a significant increase. And then we drop below that, right? And we see a 36% increase in young people considering suicide, and a 44% increase on young people who were creating a plan to die by suicide. So, though suicide, of course, is one of the things that we pay most closely attention to, right, for very obvious and important reasons. But even in those statistics, it shares with us, something really important has been happening over the course of the past 10, 15 years that we need to be tuning into, right, and we need to be paying attention to. That's a fun little thing I added that I didn't know I added. Okay. Here are just 4 little quick hits that we want to pay attention to kind of post-COVID. And the thing about statistics this close to an event is that they're still coming in, right? We don't have hard numbers that we can point to and be like, this is where we were in 2020 and 2021, right? Some of these things are still being sorted through and understood, but a couple of really important ones for us to pay attention to, right, is the increase in depressive and anxiety symptoms, right, doubled during the pandemic, which in some ways, if we just step back from that completely makes sense. It's probably true for us as adults too, right? We were stuck in moments in time where we didn't have answers. We didn't know what was going to come next, right? One of the most anxiety producing things that we as humans go through is facing unanswered questions. So when we're stuck in a moment where we can't anticipate what's coming next, our anxiety shoots up, right? And that's for adults. Now let's think about that and put it in perspective of a 15, 16-year-old who really has no perspective on how you work through something like this, right? They have no life experience. Their brain isn't set up. We'll talk about the brain in just a second. Their brain isn't set up in such a way where they can anticipate very well, right? Because they don't have the information to do that. And so you can see where moments like that would just significantly increase things like depression and anxiety. The last one I'll just point your attention to, and these are all really great statistics, and like I said, you can find them. And I have the link. I'll share the link to this report with you at the end. But is that last one that I underlined, right, is that there was this significant period of time in the life of our young people where the normal adult eyes and ears that had been and would, under normal circumstances, be in tune with them and paying attention to them weren't present, right? And we have young people who were stuck at home in situations where, man, home was not a great place for them to be, right? And you think about, of course, the extreme cases on that, but then we can also go one tier down where home isn't maybe abusive, or home isn't maybe, it's not a dangerous place for the young person, but home also isn't necessarily a place where they feel comfortable, right? Or they feel supported. And so that leaving the house to go to school was a really important time in the day for them, because if nothing else, it gave them a little reprieve from those experiences at home. Those, right, were then not happening. Let alone the fact that then, right, as teachers and other administrators and other people who work in school buildings and counselors who are looking and tuning into students, man, that work became so much more difficult and a lot less intuitive because we were trying to figure out how to do that over a screen. And so things were happening, right, or needs weren't being met, or signs were being shown that we didn't know how to pick up on. Right, and so we are seeing some residuals of that. I think in our work in Parkway, we've heard a lot of that, right? Of students, we'll ask students, hey, when do you feel like these symptoms first started for you? When did you first have these experiences? And they will point back to that, right? COVID, lockdown, right around that time. Or I made it 6 months and it was fine, but it was that next 6 months that were really hard. And so understanding that they were kind of carrying that with them without a real direction of what to do with it in a lot of cases. Okay, so what's happening with our young people, right? It does beg the questions. Why this trajectory? Why the change over that 10-year period, 2009 to 2019? We can pull that out even farther, there's some statistics that really say, that suicide ideation increase in young people really started around, you could see it shifting in 2007, when things like the iPhone became more readily available, and this is not to dog technology, it's just moment in time that we pay attention to, right? And so, there is a lot of us asking these questions. Okay, what is it that's driving some of this? And what is it that is pushing our young people to have deeper mental health experiences than maybe their peers were 20 years ago? And so I think we can start with that first column, right? Some possible causes of this increase is adolescence and pre-adolescence in and of itself is a time of crisis and anxiety, right? So we have to name that, right? We're starting at this baseline that is already elevated. And we think about the time that we all were that age and what we went through, and all of those things still remain, right? This is still a time of trying to find oneself. It's still a time of trying to understand where you fit in the world and how to make sense of the things that are going on around you. It's still a time of feeling emotions and experiences for the first time, right? It's still a time of that uncertainty of what are the skills that I have and how am I supposed to put them into the world, into use in my life, right? All of that remains. None of that has changed, right? All of that is still present. And then we get to below that. Then we start to add, right? So I think that's one of the things. When I do work with parents, even when I talk to young people, I will often point to this. Like, hey, let's remember that all that we have done over the past 20 some odd years is just add to the pile. Nothing has been removed, right? The pile is only getting bigger of what our young people are facing, understanding, trying to navigate, all of that, right, than it has been in the past. So digital and social media is a place a lot of people start, and yeah, we can name that, right? We can name that we don't fully understand even yet how to best teach our young people how to navigate things like digital and social media. Because we don't know either. We've all been on the same learning curve. I had somebody say to me once, and I thought it was so great, I should quit introducing it as somebody said to me, because I should just say I came up with it, because it's brilliant. Is that when else in the history of humanity has the 44-year-old and the 14-year-old been bestowed the same thing at the same time, right? And so when we think about things like smartphones, oh my gosh, it took us, as the adults, it took us a while to kind of catch up, if we even have, right, to where, and it's one of those things that we kind of have constantly felt like the adolescent has always been like a step ahead of where we are. And so how do we teach them how to navigate things like this when we don't know ourselves, right? And again, it's not that the smartphone, right, this thing is inherently bad. It just brings new challenges, right? It just brings new sorts of ideas, right, or ways of having to, or trying to interact with others and know oneself. And so as our young people are trying to do that with this thing, we're trying to figure out how we're supposed to teach them to do it. And do we do that a lot better today than we did 10 years ago? I hope so. But does often feel like we're kind of just still a half a step behind, right? And so that's a part of it. Academic pressures is a huge part of it, right? Our schools, and I love this school, and I love schools, but our schools from the college level on down their focuses have changed over time, right? It's so competitive. Hey, we want to be the best. We want to have the best scores. We want to da-da-da-da. Which all of that's great institutionally, but it comes down to then the students, the young people are the ones who then bear that responsibility, or they feel like they do, right? They feel like they bear that responsibility. I had a young person a couple years ago who, senior, was graduating. She did not go to Parkway. Parkway School. She went to a different school. I mean, she was done, right? Like, school was essentially over for this person. She was going to college. She knew where she was going. It was just a matter of getting to graduation day, right? But there was one thing left that she could do. She could take the psych AP test. And we spent hours talking about why she would choose to take the psych AP test, right? And it kept coming back to her feeling a responsibility in order to show how much she had learned. And how do we find that balance with our young people of going, okay, that's great. I'm not sure you owe that school anything anymore, right? You have given a lot to that school, and they've given a lot to you. Can we just celebrate the end and be good with it? But that's a really hard thing for some students to do, right? They feel that responsibility. They want to achieve as they want their school to achieve. They want to see their name at the top of lists, but that what comes along with it, right? And do all students have the ability to know how to manage that? And how do we teach our students how to manage things like that? I won't go through all of these, but I do want to highlight two more. One is a greater awareness of the world. I was just today talking with a college student, a WashU student, about this and her experience of this and how much that has weighed on her growing up. That our young people have a greater sense of what's going on in the world than ever before in history, right? I'm a high schooler of the 1990s. If I wanted to tune out of life, I just didn't turn on the news, and I didn't read the newspaper like I was going to read the newspaper anyway, right? I mean, that was essentially it. I didn't turn on the nightly news because I wasn't going to watch, CNN or anything unless it was the OJ trial, and I wasn't going to read the newspaper, and right, and then you just kind of live in that. There's something beautiful about the adolescent bubble that can be created when you're just focused on the community that's right in front of you, right? When you're given that space to just be the 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old that you are supposed to be. And you don't have to worry about fixing the world's problems yet because that's not your job. You're not there yet. You're still in that process of development, and allowing ourselves to be in that process of development, I think, is really important. But that's really hard when this or the computer or whatever dings at you, right? Every time something tragic happens, right? Or there's another shooting, or there's another experience of racial interactions around police officers, or there's another just adults talking to each other like they're juveniles for whatever reason that we like to do that now, right? So our young people internalize that, try to figure out how to deal with it. What are they going to do with it, right? What does that mean? What does that mean for my future? How am I supposed to respond to that? All these questions that, again, right, feed right into that adolescent experience. Socioeconomic factors very much play into that. We know that from statistics. The middle class continues to shrink, right? So we know there continues to be a larger divide, and our young people very much experience that. Questions about sexuality and gender, these are things we talk about a lot more, which is wonderful and important, but it does then bring to the surface questions and ideas and thoughts and conflict and all sorts of things. And so how do we teach our young people how to handle that, right? What does it mean if I believe one thing along these lines and my parent believes something very strongly the opposite of what I believe? What am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that if I feel like I'm gay? And I might be, and I'm hearing these other messages at home or even with my friend group or whatever, right? And so right, adding to that pile of things that our young people are struggling with. And then we do, on a positive note, we discuss mental health more, which is great. We should. We're supposed to, right? We don't hide the fact that we break our arm. Why would we hide the fact that sometimes our brain, isn't functioning the way it could, right? And so there is that too, right? As we speak to increases, let's name. These are things we talk about a little bit more. And so maybe people are being a little more honest and upfront, right, and transparent about what it is that they're experiencing, which is a great thing. Okay, just go through these last two boxes really quick because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and all that good stuff at the end. Another thing I think we have to name that adds to this is this lack of understanding, especially around adolescence. What it means to be an adolescent, right? I think we've blurred the lines. We don't understand why adolescence lasts as long as it does. We want it to be over when they turn 18. Surprise, it's not, right? We don't want it to start until they get to like 8th grade. Surprise, it starts in like 4th or 5th grade, right? And we can get into all the reasons why that's true. But it's true, right? It's just where we are. And so understanding that some of the things that there's this old way of thinking, right? And again, it's not uncommon around mental health to find excuses or just reasons to just kind of brush things off, right? And so when you talk to a parent and you say, hey, this is what your student is going through and what they disclosed to us, well, that just sounds like teenage stuff to me. Okay, well, it might be teenage stuff. I'm not sure we've done a great job of meeting the needs of teenagers over the years. So even if it is just teenage stuff, it's probably something that's worth addressing and talking about, right? But we do still have that pushback, and sometimes that falls back on us as parents because we don't want something to be wrong with our student, our child, or the person who we're caring for, right? Because does that reflect bad on me? Does that mean I've made a mistake? Does that mean, right? And so being able to say, oh, well, maybe, guess what? I'm not a perfect parent, shocker, and I've made some mistakes, and maybe it had some residual effects. Okay, it doesn't mean it can't be met, right? It can't be addressed. We can't figure out what's going on so that we can make it better. Or it might be that sometimes we just, right, all the list of other things just have outweighed the good stuff, right? This is not to say we're not still doing good stuff for our young people. We're doing great stuff. But sometimes the other stuff outweighs the good stuff. And sometimes the brain just doesn't function the way it's designed to, right? And so understanding that all of those are happening. And so being able to say to our young person, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. I hear you, right? Or being able to not take it personally when our young people are struggling, that it's not necessarily a condemnation against our parenting style or our child rearing style. It might be just something that's happening. If something's wrong that my student will let me know, yeah. Sometimes that's great. We love it. We love it when they self-identify and they're able to say, I'm struggling, this is what I need. And they're kids. They're kids who don't want to disappoint the people who love them the most. They're kids who are very hyper-aware of what they think their parents or guardian are experiencing, right? They're pretty good at coming up with assumptions that don't always mesh with reality, but it's their reality. And so, the self-identifying student is great, but they're the minority in this conversation, right? The majority of the time, when our young people self-identify, it's through crisis moments, right? Or they won't say, I am struggling with anxiety. They will have an anxiety attack, right? We'll see it manifest itself. Or they'll start to withdraw, or they'll turn to anger, or anger is a safer emotion. That's a whole other hour and a half we can talk about, right? But that becomes our default. We don't know what else to do, or I don't like this feeling, and right, we go to anger. And so understanding that's most of the time what's happening. And so how do we do a better job of reaching out and asking the question first instead of sitting back and waiting for self-identification. The teenage brain is different than the adult brain. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Some of you have heard me speak before, and you know that I love the brain. And so we're going to talk about that. And the other thing we'll talk about later is this: we have been stuck probably forever in a crisis management mode when it comes to mental health, right? We are dealing with the crises as they occur. And we have not spent a lot of time focusing on a prevention and early detection model, and I wonder, and in the work that we are doing, that's one of the things we're very much focused on and looking towards is how do we shift that, right? How do we come off the crisis response model and into a more prevention and early detection model, which then goes back to that self-identification, right? Where we're offering more opportunities to detect and to have students be able to share where they are so that we can intervene and meet them before the crisis happens. And then there's lack of resources. Navigating the mental health system is terrible. Even the most resourced people struggle with it, right? It's just horrible on all sorts of levels. Schools can't answer all the questions, right? I was just talking to Dr. Marty about this, right? The increased expectation that schools are going to identify, support, manage, right? The wellness of the students in their buildings continues to increase, and that's just not a fair expectation of our schools. Stigma is still there. There's still very much a stigma around mental health. Understanding the bigger picture, right? We struggle to put the dots together. Just as humans, we like what's right in front of us. And this is what I see, so this is all there is. But, right, broadening our understanding of how mental health is manifested, where it comes from, where our struggles, right, can be born out of, all of that, we need to get better at it. And adolescents are dependent on adults, right? And we often forget that, especially as our adolescents get older and they start to push away and we start to go, oh, okay, right? But that, an adolescent can't make a therapy appointment on their own, right? They are dependent on the adults in their lives to do that. And many of our adolescents can't transport themselves on their own. They are reliant on the adults in their lives to do that, right? Many of our adolescents can't figure out, they wouldn't even know where to start with things like insurance and all the things that you need to take care of your mental health in our society. They're dependent on adults to do that. So how do we make ourselves more resourceful and more available to the young people, right? And again, going back to the self-identification part, how do we not sit back and wait for the self-identification to happen, but instead encourage the conversation in an ongoing manner? All right, just quick, everybody doing okay? You need a break? Need a question? Okay. We will do questions, and you can stop me at any time. That's fine. Quick adolescent brain, this is like less than the 101 version of the adolescent brain. This is like the 075 version, but we're going to do it really quick. But I think it's important. This is one of the things, every time I'm with adults who work with adolescents, I go to this because I think it is so important for us as we come to relate and understand and communicate with young people, that we have to understand that our brains, the adult brain and the adolescent brain, function very differently from each other. And we forget that, and they can't do anything about it, right? And so the adolescent brain is an emotionally driven organ, right? This part of the brain is the front prefrontal cortex of the brain is the last part of the brain to develop as it's transitioning from a child's brain to an adult brain. This is the last part. And this is where we do all our great wet blanket thinking. This is where we do all the logic and reasoning, right? And it's not that they don't have access to it. They do. But what happens is this part of the brain, the emotional center of the brain, matures faster and sooner. And so the brain is unbalanced. The brain is processing information through an emotional lens without the full capabilities of its logic and reasoning to make sense of it, right? Historically, we blame hormones for things that happen when our young people are young. But the reality of the hormone conversation is after the body has finished making its transition, the hormones level off, right? But the brain is still developing, right? The adolescent brain is not finished, even though the physical changes that happened in adolescence and in puberty may have completed themselves, right? And so our young people are processing everything they do through emotion first, right? And when they say to us as adults, you don't understand, you don't get me, they're right. They're right. We don't like to hear it, but you're right. Because what happens is we approach the issue from the prefrontal cortex part of our brain, and they're approaching the issue from the emotional part of their brain, because that's what's firing on all cylinders, and this is trying really hard to catch up. Now, one of the reasons why we got to put great adults in our lives of our young people is because that's what's happening, right? They're building the synapses and the neural pathways and all the cool stuff so that the emotional center of the brain and the logic and reasoning center of the brain can communicate better. And the logic and reasoning part of the brain can say to them sometimes, hey, that doesn't make any sense. But until they get to that point, right, the emotions are going. Part of that also means because we don't like to think about negative outcomes, the brain defaults to positive outcomes, right? So we get frustrated with our young people when they make certain decisions, and our adult brain says, why would you make that decision? Didn't you think of this, or this happening? All negative outcomes. And they're like, no. And they're not being smart. They're not trying to get under maybe they're trying to get under your skin a little bit. But there's a reality to it, right? That literally the brain didn't even go there. It landed on an outcome that felt good to it, that was a positive emotional experience, and we went for it because it was going to be awesome, right? It was going to be awesome when I rode on the hood of my friend's car. That was going to be great. And so understanding that's happening. When we add then their mental wellness and mental health into that, you can see, right? You can see why things like suicidal ideation come into the brain of a young person because it's an emotional reaction to what's going on. But to them, it is a reaction, right? And it is a way out of what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And doesn't have the perspective, right? We lose that too. We as the adults forget our young people have no perspective. And it's not your fault. It's not their fault. They just haven't lived life, right? And so they don't know or understand how negative or difficult situations can be resolved in a positive way. They don't know or understand when they feel this way, that this feeling they've never felt before, right? It's an adult-sized emotion with a child's like reasoning of what the emotion is. So they've never felt this feeling before. They literally have no perspective of that feeling won't last forever. And so it becomes this, it can become this almost torturous experience of I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life, right? And so you can see where things like suicidal ideation or other ways of trying to relieve that feeling come into play with our young people. So we have to see it as this emotional. When we're able to meet our young people in their emotion, it changes the game. It changes the game for us as the adults in our lives. Because then when we are able to numb that prefrontal cortex part of our brain down just a little bit and reconnect with that emotional part of our brain that some of us, by the way, when you get to be old, you don't love. Right? Because there's lots of stuff hidden in there that we don't necessarily like to revisit. But when we allow ourselves to do it, and we can meet our young people in the emotion first, wow, then we're making strides, right? Then we're opening doors for sharing. Then we're allowing ourselves to be positioned to explain something or teach something or help them see something from a new perspective because we took the time to go to the emotion first, meet them in that space. Once they were like, oh, they do get me. That's cool, right? Their brains are looking for more information, right? It's searching. That's what an adolescent brain is. It is searching for information. It is wanting to be formed. And so now that I have seen this person as a safe person who understands me, oh, now I can learn from them. Or now I can trust them that they're going to help do the things that I need done. right? Or when they insist that something that makes me really scared is actually a good thing, like going to therapy, well, I'm more likely to believe them and trust them because they've taken the time to understand where I really am and what I'm experiencing. So everything then is right, and so it's a organ of stimulation in this time. It wants to be stimulated. It's looking for ways to be stimulated. It gets stimulated through all those things that we've listed there, right? Peers, adults, school, physical activities, feelings of belonging, right? Introspection, like having time to like think about, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to be alive, right? And like processing big philosophical questions for the first time, and just like, oh my gosh, why am I even thinking about this stuff, right? And even the stimulation of sleep, right? And I like to end on that because this is something we often forget, and our young people don't like to go to bed when we go to bed, and so we don't know how long they're up. But it's in our sleep process that the brain development is really happening. So sleep is really important, y'all. Sleep's really important because it's while we're sleeping that those cool neural pathways and all the cool stuff that's happening up here really gets to fire up and gets to imprint, right, and gets to become more long-lasting. And so we have to be willing to understand the adolescent brain for what it is, because then we get to better understand how that's playing a role into the mental health journeys that our young people are on. Okay? And also that list of things, peers, adults, school, physical activities, belonging, introspection, sleep, those are often places, right, where we start to see mental health struggles show up, right? Because those are the things that are the focus of their energy and the focus of their attention, and then often become the places that then help or struggle to then be lived out, right, or engaged with, or whatever, right, when we start to see some of that mental health, those mental health struggles occur. All right, everybody feel like you can go do neurosurgery now? You're like, I got good books. I have a resource sheet after if you want to read more about the adolescent brain. Whew, they're page turners. They're really good. It'll change the way you see your young person. It'll change the way you see yourself. Like, I love that there's young people in this room because these are things I wish I would have known when I was your all's age. Because it totally changes, it can change your perspective on what's going on inside of your own head, right? Instead of that feeling like, oh, I can't make sense out of anything, or why am I feeling all these things? Oh, well, yeah, because your brain, it's your brain. Like, just blame your brain, right? It's just what's going on. It's not the excuse for like everything. You can't be like, well, sorry, my brain's emotionally, fired up right now, teacher, so I just decided I wasn't going to do that thing that I was supposed to do. But it does sure give us some answers of like why sometimes those things are hard for us or difficult, right, to engage in. Okay, the next part, what do we do? So we understand the brain. Now we got to talk to these young people. And again, this is something that adults kind of tend to struggle with sometimes. And so let's own the fact that it can feel very daunting to communicate with a teenager. Yes? If you're like 30 and over, it can start to feel a little daunting to communicate with a teenager. One, we remember what's going on inside their brain. So that in and of itself is hopefully just an entry point, right? To help you feel a little less intimidated and a little more able to engage in what's going on. But the other thing is we don't necessarily, I'm giving you all some insider tips, so don't use it against me. But communicating with a teenager brings up our own repressed adolescence. And we don't always like it, right? We remember what it's like to feel those feelings so big. We remember what it's like to not feel like we have a lot of answers, but we got a lot of questions, right? We remember what it's like to not know where we're safe and where we're not. And so sometimes we go and we avoid that communication with our young people because of what it elicits in us. Or because it can also elicit in us this this feeling like we have to have all the answers, and we don't. And so instead of like being stumped by you, 16-year-old, let's just talk about safe things that make me feel comfortable, right? But you can see where, as we're talking about mental health, you can see where that can cause issues and where we then start to miss things that we need to be paying attention to. So some preventative, this communication part is both intervention, right? If a struggle moment, a difficult mental health moment arises, but it's also it's groundwork stuff, right? It's that getting in a position so that if these moments come, when these moments come, to have these bigger conversations, these more difficult conversations, that we've laid this groundwork so that, one, we feel comfortable in doing it, and two, it feels very natural to the young person in our life, right? Because they're also really tuned in to like changes and different things and like being suspicious. And you're like, you never talked to me about this, Mom. Why are we talking about this now, right? As opposed to entering into a conversation that feels very familiar to them. And then those conversations can happen in a more natural sort of way. So we create space for sharing the positive as well as the negative, right? They'll tell you, adolescents will tell you, the majority of my conversations I have with my parents are around things I do wrong. And again, that's an emotional response, right? It's not a logic and reasoning response, it's an emotional response. We hold on to negative emotions more, all the things, right? We can get into all that. But that's the way they feel, then we need to go out of our way to make sure we have these other non-negative interactions with them and talk about things in a positive way, right? Or talk about just good stuff, just things we're proud of about them, things we want to know that they're interested in, things that are just silly and goofy and fun, right? That we can have both, that we can talk about the more negative, difficult stuff, we can talk about the positive, fun stuff, and it both feel very natural, right? So we create space for that. We create space that you can, as the adult, and here's one we get hung up on too, that you as the adult are okay talking about the difficult things, right? We sit with young people and they say to us, I can't tell my mom that. She can't handle it. I can't tell my grandma that. She can't handle it, right? I can't tell my dad that. He can't handle that. And what's happened over time, a lot of times unintentionally, is we have given that message to our young people that we're afraid of what's inside of you and that there's something in there that I can't handle. And so then what happens is they start to feel like they have to deal with it on their own, right? Keep it inside. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to, right, project something or make somebody feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to worry about me. They got enough other things to worry about. We hear all of these things. Right? And part of that is our preemptive work in that is showing them that we're okay talking about the difficult things, right? Everything from mental health to drugs and alcohol to sex to all the things, to money, to all the things that make us uncomfortable. We have to show them we're comfortable talking about it, right? And part of that is bringing it up before it happens and being forthright in our understanding of what's difficult for us so that we can do our own work on the side so that when I'm sitting with this young person, I'm not projecting my own uncomfortableness onto them, right? And I'm ready to meet them where they are and handle whatever it is that is in front of us. Okay. We encourage communication with other trusted adults because sometimes we don't want to tell Dad what's going on. Shocker, right? That the people who love us most are sometimes the most difficult people to share the most difficult things with. And so encouraging and nurturing trusted adult relationships with our young people is key, right? One of mine was my aunt. My mom says all the time, she would just call my aunt to find out what was going on with me, right? Because I'd go over to their house and I'd sit in the kitchen with her, she's making dinner, and I'd just blab on about everything. My mom was there, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person, you know? So it's finding those important other adult relationships and nurturing them and encouraging them, right, in the lives of our young people. Share your own mental wellness when it's appropriate. We don't dump stuff on them, right? We don't overdo, we don't overshare. But it is okay to say, sometimes I feel that way, And here are things that I've done to help with that, right? Or here are resources I've had to go access. Here, I go to therapy. I take medication. Right? Those sorts of things are totally fine sharing with your young people. Because actually what it does is it just normalizes it as something that happens. And that, again, it reinforces the fact that we're not scared of it in this space. Right? It's not something that is unknown to us. And so being willing to, appropriately share what it is that you struggle with or have gone through or are working on or all of that is really important and can go a really long way in that, even going back to the 2 slides before, in the self-identifying part, right? That then it becomes something that we do talk about in our house. And if I'm really struggling, I can go to mom and I can say, oh, I'm really struggling because mom's already showed me that she can have those conversations because she's shared some of her stuff with me. And then the last part, and this is a tough one sometimes, is that balance between not giving up and being persistent. If you feel like something's wrong, we want to assert the fact that we're picking up that something's not going, that something's off, but also giving the space, right? That's adolescence in and of itself, right? I'm allowing you the space to process, to think about, to work on whatever, but I'm also very present and I'm ready to talk, right? Or it might be your responsibility as the parent to come back again. Hey, had a chance to think about what we brought up the other day, right? Or I'm still noticing this is going on and it's making me question if you're okay, right? And that beautiful balance, and sometimes we nail it, and you know it as a parent or someone who lives in the life of young people. It's like when we nail it, we're like, oh, I did it. And when we mess it up, yeah, we know we messed it up too, right? But it's that constant working on where's that right balance between pushing and insisting and really digging for more information, and then also giving our young people the space they might need just to process. Okay, what's it going to be like when I tell mom this? How do I find the words, right? How do I understand it myself, right? All the things that they need to do that take some time. All right, this is the last kind of what we do slide, and then we're going to shift gears a little bit. So what do we do? So these are kind of my 3 typical responses to our young people when they have mental health moments that need to be attended to. We either ignore / overreact, right? Which is what a lot of young people are worried of. They're worried about either disclosing something and it being ignored or brushed aside or not taken seriously, or they're worried about disclosing something and the freak out happening, right? And the message of both often is the problem's too big to deal with, right? And so you are bringing something that I cannot handle and I cannot deal with. It's too big for me to deal with it. It then pushes them into this belief that they have to take care of it themselves, right? Which then leads into isolation. And we know that those last 2 blocks are ones we really pay attention to, because it's in those spaces that our young people are left to their own brains, or God forbid, the internet, to figure out what it is that they're supposed to do in that moment, right? And so that's the biggest thing I would say I want you to walk away with is we can't ignore or overreact. And I know they're hard. I know that's a hard ask sometimes, but we can't do that because that's what leads into that isolation space, which then leads into some more difficult, right, ways of thinking. Sometimes you have, as the adult in the life, you have to take the solution and run with it. It's yours, right? Maybe we've gotten into a pretty crisis moment, and it's not appropriate to necessarily share the responsibility with the young person of what happens next and how we take care of ourselves. We do have those moments, right, where we have to be the ones to say, no, this is what's happening. But we also want to be aware that when we have to choose that, right, we want to fight against that the child feeling like they have a problem that's just like they're just a problem that is here to be dealt with, right? We need to be careful about accidentally projecting that. And we need to be careful of accidentally projecting, you can't handle this on your own, right? And even though that may be true, they're not in a space to handle it on their own, it's also a space to say, to teach, right? And to be present and to help them understand what's going on, why it's happening this way, all of that, so that if they ever need to put some of these skills to use when they are on their own, that those things start to be built, right? Those learnings start to happen. And then when we can, we try to solve these issues together, right? That's the beauty of, especially as our adolescents move into high school and in college, right? They can have some of these conversations around where are we going with this? How do we address it? How do we take care of what's going on? How do we best validate what you're feeling and what you're experiencing and what you feel like you need versus what I see you're going through and what I'm feeling like you need, right? That questions and unknowing, right, or mixed emotions are okay, right? That I kind of feel like I want to see a counselor, but I have really, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, or I'm not really sure what that's going to be like, or I'm not really sure I want to commit 1 hour out of my week to this, right, or whatever it might be. And then together then coming to that understanding of when we face moments that we don't have the solution to, but that we are willing to go outside ourselves and ask, right, and say, yep, we need help. We need help that's beyond what I can give you as your parent. We need help beyond what you're capable of course, of doing on your own as a young person, and that we need to bring in outside help. So 3 things, right? So in response to mental health moments with our young people, right, we work to understand what's happening in the developing brain, right? That helps us make a connection with our young person. We develop habits of good communication, both pre-moment, right, groundwork moment, but also in the moment, right? Not shying away from the difficult conversations, not showing a lot of overwhelm or I can't handle this, right? Not meeting them with logic and reasoning in their emotion, right? That understanding of we need good communication in the moments and prior to the moments and post the moments and all the moments. And that we're going to respond appropriately to mental health concerns, right? And I think that's the biggest takeaway on that last one, is that it's in our non-response or overreactions, right, to what's going on, that then the system, the family system, the communication system starts to fall apart, and they start to retreat. They'll retreat into isolation. All right, any questions about all that before we kind of move to the final part? Okay. I know you're just writing all your questions down, and they're going to come flying at me in 10 minutes. I can't wait. All right. So we've kind of named where we are and what's going on in the lives of our young people. We've talked about how we respond to it kind of right now. Want to shift our focus a little bit. Is like if this is an issue, and we know it's an issue, how do we address it, right? On a more grand scale, on a bigger, from a larger perspective, how do we start to address what's going on in our world with our young people? And I just decided to break it down like this. I think there's a number of ways we could break it down, but I wanted to break it down like this. We've been, throughout the history of time, maybe, I don't know, but we are stuck in this crisis response model, that we wait until our young people, and it's probably true about us as adults too, but tonight we're talking about young people, right? We wait until our young people are in crisis, and then we find intervention. And what happens in that way of thinking, right, is that intervention is just in response to crisis. That's the only time we have intervention, is when we have gotten to that crisis point, right? And it's then seen only as appropriate for those in crisis. And you see where that disconnect starts to happen, right? Is that it's really easy to say, oh, I don't need that. I don't need therapy. I don't need this. I don't need that support. I'm fine. I'm going to school. I'm doing my work. I'm seeing my friends. I'm doing, right? I'm still doing my sports. All the things I'm doing fine. I'm not in crisis. I don't need that. As opposed to, oh, I feel these things going on and something's changing and I don't know what's going on and so I need some support, right? And so we've been in this space where we do wait until crisis, and then crisis is the only thing that kind of pulls us into intervention. And then what happens is the need for intervention becomes immediate, right? So here's where the system starts to clog up, right? Because we're in crisis and we need immediate assistance, and so I'm starting to call around all these places, and everybody has a 4 to 6 week waiting period. And then what happens is I'm really in crisis, and so then I end up in the ER, and I end up in a hospital, and in these immediate crisis intervention places, and some of them are wonderful and they're great and all the good stuff, and we don't have to, not disparaging anything, but we also know that sometimes inpatient treatment is not for everybody, right? And had it been intervened earlier, we would have never gotten to inpatient treatment. And so, you can see that from a systems perspective, you can see where it starts to get gummed up because we're stuck in this crisis response way of addressing this stuff, right? And then we start to believe that mental wellness is only affected by our crisis moments, right? That if I'm not having a crisis, then I'm mentally well, right? Which is not true. You think about the statistics of suicidal ideation, right? The vast majority of people who have suicidal ideation never act on it, but it sure is a pretty heavy burden to walk around with, to be thinking about taking your own life, right? And so in the crisis response model, we're waiting for the suicide attempt to happen, and we're tending to that person's need as we should, but we're then also ignoring all the other people who are just walking around with this constant thought of death and what that means, right? And we know, again, when we're talking about young people, that can manifest itself in some pretty powerful ways of thinking. And what we're always, from a suicide prevention standpoint, what we're always aware of with young people is that emotionally driven brain, which leads us to emotional responses, which leads to, right, kind of it all is over and I'm just going to do it, right? Where we don't necessarily have this long runway into our suicide attempts with our young people, the same way that we tend to with adults, is that it becomes this very immediate and emotional response, right, to what's going on, without a lot of forethought of what actually happens after, again, because their brains don't work that way. So if we can shift, right, and some of the work we're doing with our student wellness program is shifting into this prevention, early detection, right? This statistic speaks volumes about what we believe, and we hope you believe that shift can do, right? If 50% of all lifetime mental illness began by age 14, and 75% of all lifetime illness begins by age 24, we probably need to be doing some prevention and early detection work, right? Because the more we can address it then in adolescence, then we're setting up for a more fruitful and sustainable adulthood. And if we can get it early, it sure is a lot easier to deal with than if we're constantly just addressing the crisis after crisis after crisis. So that means changes in conversation around mental health, right? It means talking about it in a way that speaks to its reality and how it manifests itself. It means thinking about how we start to educate our young people about what they're looking for, why it's important to be looking for, how they take care of themselves, in a way that increases the likelihood that they're able to identify issues before they become crisis moments, right? It means us as the adults in their lives changing the way we talk and converse around mental health issues, right? Both with ourselves and with the young people in our lives. The system is not, then the system's not in constant crisis mode, right? So which then frees the system up to deal with the crises that are happening. Sorry, YouTube, I just whacked the microphone. The crises that are happening, right? Then the system is in a better position to handle the crisis, because the crises will still happen. It's not to say we're going to get rid of all crisis moments. They will unfortunately still be a reality, but if we're taking care of those the crises that we can prevent, then when the crises do happen, they're just naturally, it's a smaller amount, and then the system is in a better position to address them and take care of those people. And it's an acknowledgement that mental health is important no matter the degree, right? That even if I were to never act on my suicidal ideation, the fact that I carry it around with me is a lot and impairs me in my ability to be the person who I want to be, right? And so it acknowledges that our mental health is a constant presence in our lives, and that it's important no matter what's going on, right? How many times have we I don't know, maybe you've had conversations like this with people. I know I do in the therapy session, and I do with young people I work with, right? That understanding of we sometimes we'll try to like compare, right? My difficult situation to somebody else's difficult situation, and then we'll kind of like pull ours down. Well, I shouldn't be struggling with that because it could be this. It could be worse. It could be I could be going through what that person's going through. But if it's hard for you, it's hard for you. If it's a struggle for you, it's a struggle for you. We don't have to always be playing the crisis comparative game of, oh, I shouldn't be so worked up about this because I'm not doing this, and that person is, and oh my gosh, I should just put if it's hard for you, it's hard for you. Let's just start naming that for ourselves and for each other, right? And for the young people that we're going through. Some things are going to be more difficult for you than others. You're going to respond to things differently than the other person responds to them. Something's going to affect you in a stronger way than it affects the person next to you. Through no fault of your own, you haven't done anything wrong. That's just the way this wonderful organ on the top of your head functions. And so let's address it and see it as something that needs to be addressed so that it doesn't become a crisis later, right? And we can intervene when it's easier to intervene. All right, and so our one solution, here's the sort of the advertisement part, but it's exciting. I just love talking about it. Our one solution was the Student Wellness Program, right? With that in mind, in our conversations with Aaron and Parkway and things that they were able to bring to our attention of what was happening in the schools, what they were seeing with their students, what they were hoping for in their own buildings, and what they wanted their students to experience when they were students in Parkway, right? It just manifests itself into this wonderful conversation of how do we be more proactive in how we see young people and how we go to them instead of waiting for them to come to us. And how do we go to them prior to the crisis happening and not sitting back and waiting for the crisis moment to occur. So our goal with the Student Wellness Program is to enhance every young person's learning and living by offering students, families, and schools insight, language, knowledge, and support in understanding the necessity of and need for mental health in a child's education. If you're super academic and that's your focus, great, because I'll tell you, you will be a better academic if you are mentally well and you're mentally healthy than you are if you're not, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to when we talk to schools, right? This is making for better people, all in all. It's also making for better students. It's making for better community. It's making for better experiences for everybody when we're taking care of these things. How the Student Wellness Program works, if you're not familiar, just quickly, is it's three distinct points, right? We identify, we support, we connect. We identify students who are struggling through a screener, online screener that they takes them 10 to 15 minutes. It's a PSCY Plus, we call it. It's the PSCY, which is the Pediatric Symptoms Checklist, Youth Report. plus these additional questions that our partners in Wisconsin have helped us norm with the help of Lawrence University. And so in that quick, 10 to 15 minute screening moment, we get a pretty decent snapshot of where that student is with feelings of depression and anxiety, feelings of belongingness and capability, and suicidal ideation, self-harming behavior, suicidal behavior, getting stuck in rumination. Lots of really important things that we're able to get a quick measure of in that moment. And then anything that occurs or shows up on the screener that makes us go, oh, we want to know more about that. We move to that support point with the student. And we get to sit down and we get to have these amazing 30 to 45 minute conversations, therapeutic interviews with students. And the idea of them being able to maybe share and articulate something they've been struggling with for a while for the first time to someone who maybe isn't their friend is so powerful, right? And so important. And for them to be able to hear from us of, here's how we can share that with whoever's at home, right? And for them to look at us, go, you'll tell them for me? I'll tell them for you. Yeah, right. So that, because sometimes putting those words together to tell again the people who love us the most is some of the most difficult things that we can do. And so we offer that support to them to hear their story, to help them get a sense that there's hope, that there are resources, that there's support, that they're not isolated, right? All of that can happen just in that short little 30 to 45 minute interview. And then the support continues with whoever's at home with that young person as we then share with them how the screening process went, what came up from it, and our referrals and our thoughts for how to connect and what sort of resources that might be helpful. In that, too, we get to hear amazing stories and important stories from that side, right? From the parent and guardian side of things. That oftentimes, maybe we've shared something with them they didn't know, and that has happened, right? Where we've shared that their student has been cutting or has been self-harming in some way, or that their student has had suicidal ideation. And that's a hard conversation, but an important one to have. But then we also then get to hear their experience of their worry about their student or what they're struggling with and how that has affected the life of their young person. And so we get to come alongside and work with them to think about what are the best resources, what are the best supports that we can put into place. And then we have the connect part. We are building and continue to build this wonderful referral network around the city and the metro area of great clinicians who are more than happy to take referrals from us, who meet all sorts of different needs in terms of taking insurance, financial needs, sliding scale, right? Geographic locations, being able to meet in person or virtually. So we gather all that information from the families when we're meeting with them, so that when we then make these referrals, we can make referrals that are very targeted and feel very personal, right? Because we've done a lot of that groundwork for them that often leads to roadblocks in getting connected, right? It's one of our big goals is to eliminate the dead end referral. The referral of calling the person, oh, I can't see you for another 8 weeks, or I don't take your insurance, or I don't operate on a sliding scale, right? Or I don't see teenagers, or whatever it might be, that we take that part out of the equation for families. So, because we know that that's oftentimes where the parent or the adult gets frustrated and they throw up their hands and they just stop. And so we work really hard to eliminate that and make that as easy as we can, right? We can't do it all, but we work really hard to do that. One of Caring Counseling's therapists, Tracy Strebel, is here with us tonight, and Tracy is one that we refer to a lot, and Tracy actually is one who is willing to go and able to go into the school buildings to see students, and we're so thankful for that, because we know sometimes that's the access point for whatever reason, right? That's the access point, and we also know that those of us who do work with adolescents, those hours from 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 fill up really fast, right? Those post-school hours fill up really fast. And so working to create a greater accessibility by bringing providers to the students during school, or working with the school counselor or an Aaron and those to create spaces where they can do virtual sessions with their therapist during the school day, right, to make those access points greater. Tracy is more than happy to talk to you all after about how that process works and what it's like to see students in schools, and her experience with working in some of the Parkway schools and all that good stuff after. So come pick her brain. She knows a lot. She's great. We like having her around. What's a sliding scale? So oftentimes providers have, they call them sliding scales. So they have their set fee right there. This is my hourly fee, and that's what they kind of start at. But based on need or other variables, they're willing to come down off of that fee, right? And so some people offer sliding scales. Agencies like Care and Counseling we have a client assistance fund, so we can slide really low to try to meet the needs of folks, kind of in that $10 an hour range. One of the most difficult parts of this is the Medicaid system is what it is, and finding Medicaid providers can be a struggle sometimes, but that's a place where wonderful people who do sliding scales and are, some clinicians. We have some clinicians on our referral network who hold a few pro bono spots, and the other access point that we're really working on is increasing and educating families about why it's okay to see students and pre-licensure folks, because they tend to have greater accessibility, they have greater availability, and they tend not to cost as much. And you really get a twofer. There's my little plug for it. You get a twofer because you get the supervisor and you get the clinician who's seeing your student, but that person's being supervised by a licensed person who's been doing it for a long time. And so 2 therapists for the price of 1, but they're not in the same room at the same time. Oh, absolutely.
Have you guys thought about doing an opt-out model for that versus?
Well, let's see. Dr. Marty left.
I know.
So.
No, I mean, and I just as a parent and also as we were all texting. One of my kids is in one in Atlanta who's filling that thing out, and what about whatever? You know what I mean? Whereas if we're talking about transparency, if we're talking about mental health, embracing it,
Yep.
bringing it out of the shadows.
Yep.
Why can't you know what I mean? My thought would be
That's.
to make that part of our curriculum.
I think we all.
Just about that, so an opt-out model would be instead of what Parkway did, which is to say, if you're interested in doing this questionnaire for your child, sign them up. Versus an opt-out model that says if you don't want your child to do it, then because you end up getting a lot more.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, we know we're missing some of the students we need to see in this model, but it's the model that we felt like was most appropriate to start with, and I think I can say this, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we all have the vision of it becoming an opt-out at some point. It's just getting to that point at the right time. Yeah. But we'd love to do that.
So you offered this at what levels?
Yeah. So last year we saw 361 students. We saw that's in all the middle schools and all the high schools, focusing on 7th grade and 10th grade in the middle school and high schools. But we saw students. We saw at least one student in every grade, 6 to 12. And then we did a pilot in 4 elementary schools where we saw 5th graders, and we did a parent report version for 2nd graders. And so we saw 361 Parkway students last year. 60% of them identified as needing some mental health supports. So 60% of them returned positive screens. If we take the elementary school students out of that and just our middle and high schoolers, that percentage jumps to like 67, 68% of those we screened positive. And we made about an 80% connection. We had about an 80% connection rate, which means we connected 80% of those students to inside school resources and outside school resources. And that 20% is really, it wasn't accessibility question. It was that the parent or guardian just stopped talking to us or stopped doing what they needed to do to make those connections. So we had a really good success rate. It's really, we're working this year. Our goal is to have that number be 85%. We want to be about 85% connection rate. And we want to see a lot more students. And we want to see a lot more students who screen negative because that's part of the norming process of it, right? That you don't have to come to us just because you're students, and don't just sign your student up because they're in crisis. We sign the student up because this is important to do. We talk to when we administer the screener, we talk to the students about, we think of this the same way we think of vision screenings, hearing screenings, why we go to the doctor once a year, right? We do those things. Sometimes we do those things because we know something's not right and we're trying to figure out what's going on and we're trying to figure out the resources we need. And other times we do those things just to make sure things are going as well as we think they are. And with the possibility of finding something early so that we can handle it before it becomes a crisis. And so, yeah, my big appeal this year to students and to families, and we're working with each school to how we do this better, is how do we get everybody to sign up, right? Not just students. How do you get everybody here to sign up? Oh, there's a QR code right back there. You can just yeah. I'm assuming there are thousands on YouTube, right? About thousands? I'm in the ballpark? I'm in the ballpark. I can tell. Right? How do we keep having this conversation and have this conversation with the people who need to hear it? I know we're about out of time, so so this year, we're in every Parkway school, grades 5, 7, and 10. It's available to anybody 5th grade and above, right? So when we go into the schools, we focus on specific grades. They become our target audience, but we never turn any student away. So if the counselor or care coordinator or social worker or whoever has someone who they encourage to sign up, even though they're in 11th grade or 9th grade or 8th grade, whatever, we're happy to see them. A lot of times we'll get siblings, right? Siblings are different grade levels, and the family will sign both the siblings up, which is wonderful. The only reason why we have to stop at 5th grade is, as the tool is written right now, it's written at a 5th grade level. And we're working this year, it's one of the things we'll be working on this year, is creating we just didn't love how the pilot went with the parent report, and so we're working to create a more hybrid model for the younger students where we're getting good parent feedback, but we also are figuring out a way where we can get a little FaceTime with the student as well, because we felt like we were missing a really big piece by just relying on the parent feedback. What's that? Let's bring them all. Yeah, teacher input is going to be important for that age group especially. Yeah. So dates are all set for every school. There's papers on the end of the row, and on the back of them is just the calendar of dates of when we're in each school. We're at each school once, except for the high schools we go to twice, and that was one of the things we heard from the high school counselors last year, is that for that age to spread it out. So we go to each high school once a semester, and then all the other schools were at once throughout the year. We'd love to do more. We gotta get more. I gotta be able to hire more people at some point. But yes, oh my gosh, yes. My favorite people in the room. Go.
In this program, are there any activities for students besides participating in therapy?
So, great question. So, we have created lots of different resources. So therapy may be a resource, but we also know that sometimes it's more about getting connected with the group, right? And so if you have like specific needs and helping you find maybe therapeutic groups or other sorts of groups that might be beneficial to you. We've collected just kind of a whole bunch of different resources in the St. Louis area, and we really do try to meet, as we're working with the student and as we're working with the parent or guardian, we try to help identify what will be most helpful to that student. We also will do some referring back to the school. We actually really encourage looping the school counselor or the care coordinator or social worker, whoever that student is working most closely with or has a relationship with, just so that we talk to the students about this, just so that that person may not be your ongoing therapeutic person, but And it sure is, if you're just having kind of a cruddy day, it sure is nice to know that someone in the building already kind of knows what you're working on, right? It makes it a lot easier to go knock on their door and say, I'm having a cruddy day. If we feel like we don't have to totally explain ourselves as to why I'm there, why you're there, So, yes, so we try to take a pretty broad approach to it. But most of the referrals we make are for therapy. Yeah. Yes.
So our school is listed as the first week, and apparently it ends in 2 days. And as somebody who, I know I've been through a lot of those crises moments last year, especially coming out of lockdown, and I don't think I've ever heard of this resource. I don't think the school, or even most of my peers, have heard of this resource. So, you know, what you can do to make it more accessible so that students like me know how to do it?
Yes. You and I are going to talk after this. You are asking that's a great question. And that's something that we are very much focusing on this year, of how we best because kind of the model last year and even kind of the beginning of this year, but we're adjusting it, is kind of the information goes right to home, whoever's at home, because it's up to that group of people to sign you up for it at this point. But we're making some adjustments, and I think we need to start going through you all too. And yes to everything you said. We got to be better at it. And we're working at it. We're working at it. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Yeah. So the schools, and Aaron can speak to this a little bit. So 4 weeks out from our time, our assigned date at each school, the school receives information from the district that they tailor to their specific building, and it starts going out that way. So you should start receiving information about student wellness 4 weeks prior to our arrival in that building, and then the registration process is explained in that. There's a link, and people register through our website and all that stuff. But the communication of it does fall to the school. We work really closely with the schools to come up with creative ways to try to get the message out. We're going to be at South High next week, and one of the things we're trying to do different at South High is kind of go through, make sure the students are just as aware of it as those at home are aware of it, with the hope of the student saying, hey, this is coming to my school and I really want to be signed up for it. So, yeah. So principals' letters and newsletters, it goes out. Counseling newsletters and communications, it goes out. Some schools have played around with it coming from other sources, and that has actually been pretty successful. West Middle actually sent it out through the science department last year as kind of part of the health curriculum or something. Couldn't remember exactly how they phrased it, but that people were more likely to open that email than the principal's newsletter email. So thinking about that. What's that?
Social media as well.
Yeah, social media as well. Yeah.
Does this program have any flyers that could be given out to the or to the school in general that way it could be put up? Because I know for a fact that a lot of students and a lot of parents do not check their email, but they do check out the flyers that are hung out around the school.
So, yes. And when we're back at West High in February, March, whenever that is, I'm coming to you guys. Yes, yeah. So I thank you for you all for naming that. You're right. That's something we got to figure out how to do better, and we're all learning, and the schools are learning. Right, this is something new for them too, and I think we all wish that every parent was like waiting for it to come over their email and they're clicking the registration button, but we know that's not how it happens. And so I love the way you all are thinking and how we can generate some real enthusiasm around the importance of it from the students themselves, and not just relying on the parents. So thank you. So yes, we're coming back. Okay, we're going to talk after. All right. What else? I know we're way over time, so yeah.
This is probably a whole other night, but, just in terms of that, what you were talking about, that sort of generational piece, and
It's different.
And our kids will spend hours in the basement, sort of alone, but not really alone.
Yep, that's totally different.
If you get to, so like, I think 25 years ago, if our kids were alone in the basement by themselves with a number of hours, you'd be like, ooh, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's kind of like, they say, we're fine, I got friends, they're all alive, but I got
Right.
friends. So it's like, do we listen to that? Do we say, okay, those are your friends, and you know what I mean? Well, how do we navigate, like you were talking about on the phone, that whole gaming world?
Yeah.
You know, what is that?
Aaron, write that one down.
I was thinking that should be the next topic.
Yeah. No, because I think, Kristen, what you're raising are really important. And I'm going to kind of answer your question with a statistic, but that's okay. That what's happened over the last 30, 40 years is the way we experience and live out adolescence has shifted dramatically, right? It's just shifted dramatically. I mean, right, we were going to the arcade together, hanging out at the mall, hanging out in Taco Bell parking lots, whatever we did, and but we weren't in our basement. But in some ways, the basement is just the new Taco Bell parking lot, right? It just, because that's not available to them anymore. I mean, you have to think about that too, right? Going to the mall, the way we went to the mall, like as an all-day experience, just to like spend $0, doesn't really exist for our young people anymore. And so what's happened is they've created different sorts of communities, right? There's still a community. Their online community is still a community. These are people. I have a client, and he's a huge gamer, and he's closer, like feels safer with those people than a lot of the people that he sees when he goes to class every day. And so I think we do have to be careful about just judging, oh, it's different, it's bad, right? But at the same time, we have to also ask, oh, what have we lost? We might have lost something really important in that transition. Oh, we got to kind of hone in on what it is that what have we lost, right? And what maybe do we need to get creative about how we bring back into the life of a growing adolescent that has just, maybe through no fault of anybody's own, except for capitalism, has fallen away, right? If you want to sign up, our thousands of online viewers, this is on your screen too. This QR code will take you right to the registration page. Our students do need to be registered by their parent or guardian at this point, unless the student is 18 years old or older. They can sign themselves up. The registration page is super simple to navigate, and you just select the school that your student goes to, and then it will come to us, and we'll take it from there. You can see the calendar. There's a link on the registration page that will give you that same calendar that we have here in the room of when we'll be at each of your schools. So, if you go to your student, is a student at Hannah Woods, it's going to be a while before we see you, but you can still sign up today if you wanted to, and we look forward to seeing you the first week in May. These are the wonderful people who come. The last thing I'll mention is you might be thinking, hey, that guy's kid goes to school with my kid, and that would be weird if he were to talk to them about what's going on. And I'll say that just so that you all know that the two schools that my children go to, I'll take a back seat on, and our amazing team will take the lead, just to try to eliminate any of the possible uncomfortableness that could occur by the fact that they might know who I am, and they might know who my kids are, and they might come to my house at some point. And we want that to continue to be an option, and we want them to feel like they can take and participate in the student wellness program. We want both. And then feel free to go to, we have a resource page that I think is really good, and it's growing, and we're learning a lot about what we want on it. But at the bottom of the resource page, if you scroll to the bottom, there are these just real quick one-page sheets about things that you might be wondering about. And we often send them directly to parents. That's what they look like. Who, if we share with a parent, hey, your student disclosed some suicidal ideation, we send them this information just to help you better understand what's going on. Again, to relieve that anxiety in you so that you can be more present for your student. So feel free to check that out. But okay, I'll stop. I'm now like 15 minutes over time. But we did get started 10 minutes late, so that means I'm only 5 minutes over time, which means I win. Right, Jen? It's pretty good. My wife will say that's pretty good for me. If you're interested in other resources, I do have a resource sheet you can take pictures of. Books that I really like about adolescent brain, raising adolescent girls, raising adolescent boys, LGBTQ plus adolescents, and other important things. There's a really good, the New York Times, the Daily podcast did a few weeks ago, had one just on the adolescent mental health crisis, and it was really good. And then there's another one that I really like that just dropped over the summer called Call for Help, and it's really in response to 988 being released, which is if you're not familiar with what 988 is, it's the 911 of mental health intervention, with the idea of moving away from law enforcement responding to mental health crises and having a more trained professionals, crisis intervention professionals respond to mental health crises. So anyway, that's growing. But anyway, the podcast really kind of speaks to where it came from, why it's important, what the pitfalls of it are right now, what has to happen, all that good stuff. So it's worth a listen if you're interested in stuff like that. Okay, now I'll stop talking. Bye.